want to welcome the public who's watching this live stream to the Town of Mooresville Board Budget Workshop meeting on this Thursday, May 14th. It's a little after 5 o'clock. And at this time, I'd like to welcome everyone. Go ahead and start the budget workshop and recognize Mr. Heeman, our town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Would you like me to do an invocation tonight? Thank you. Let us pray. Father, we thank you so much for a chance to be here again to be about your business. We pray for wisdom. We thank you that we can be gathered together. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, so tonight we have a little bit of a recap real quickly on items to revisit. This was our list just to make sure that we've got everything on there that we wrote down last night. This is our list from yesterday. Code compliance officer versus contracted service, TI succession plan and staffing level, lighting and cameras in the back parking lot of the library, the radio maintenance issue that we've got to find resolution for. I think we've got about a year and a half we determined on that. Talbert wayfinding signage to the park, and increased camera and monitoring and usage. How do we actually get more use out of those cameras as we look at exit cameras and use those for public safety purposes? So any changes, additions, comments on that list? Okay, we will roll on then. Just a quick recap. This is where we started yesterday. Just a reminder overall for those that weren't able to join us yesterday that the general fund, we're looking at around a 6.21% decrease from last year, which was $75,531,475. And I'll skip the detail on this because we talked about that significantly yesterday, but you've got that in your packet where we ended up departmentally. And I'll kind of queue up fire department presentation tonight. We've got Chief Deaton with us. I will tell you just a couple quick items. Over the last 5 years, when you read our calls for service in this department, they've gone from 4,118 a year to 7,497. We have had a tremendous number of calls for service. They outpace, for some reason they outpace our population growth, and my guess is that's because our traffic, as we serve as a shopping center for this region, also outpaces our population growth. I will say that as we met, I mentioned this yesterday, that we met and actually prioritized. We had 25 positions that were requested in the budget. I can tell you that the top priority for us, and the chief will talk a little more about this, our top priority was staffing of Station 6. There is not full staffing shown in this proposal because of the timing related to Station 6, but that's not to say that we don't have additional staffing needs. And as I mentioned, Chief will talk a little bit more about that. So I'd like to turn it over to Chief Deaton to discuss the fire department budget this year.
Thank you, Mr. Heeman. So the current budget reflects that there's a request for, in the budget, is 3 firefighters to hire in January. Understand that our process, when we have an application process, we run it through a series of physical tests, a written test, and then we put them in a recruit class. that does take some time. So hiring them earlier does help us get the training in that they're going to be required to perform their duties. As you remember, last year we started this process of doing 3 in July, which were turned down. We didn't get those 3. This year we asked for 6 firefighters and a battalion chief, and we're at 3. So that's 6 that we're behind. Understand it's going to take 12 people before Station 6 opens. So whatever timing that is, if Station 6, which was anticipated to be started by now, it's obviously not under construction. So 12 months roughly from the start date, we need 12 firefighters just to open. That does not take in consideration a military deployment, a retirement that's going to happen in 2 months, and at least a pretty constant 2 people on FMLA. And I'll be happy to answer any questions on the staffing piece, because I know that's always something that comes up.
Any comments or questions for Chief on that?
If I could add one quick thing, Mayor, that this would be one of the things, as we talked about, what things would you look at mid-year, depending upon where we are in funding, this would certainly be one of the highest things that we would recommend that we look at again, quite frankly.
I would like to also talk about our 3 staff vehicles. We currently have vehicles that are scoring 15, 16 now. We're trying to use them as not an everyday driver, but they do get used pretty often. So every time a vehicle's in the shop, they're using one of these. This just replaces and keeps up with what the standard is by getting rid of vehicles that no longer can run emergency traffic and carry on. These vehicles are 7, 8, 9 years old, most of them, but we really do need the additional vehicles. And then the design of Station 7. And I know there was a question last night about Station 7 design money. I did some looking this morning, and your planning department puts out a what's in the hopper, per se. This is what's either being built or new projects. It's in the planning process somewhere. In the on Lane Tree Road or Alcove Road, there's right at 500,000 square foot in the hopper. That is not counting what's already there. Town-wide, there's right at 2 million square feet. This is a 4-page document of projects. There's a lot of building coming south of town. And the reason I'm asking for some design money, we've had property at Lane Tree, and Deborah may correct me, but I think it's 2008 we did the said bonds. Around that time, that property has been in our possession. It is a viable piece of property. I think we got to look at other options before we go 100% spend the design money. But if I don't have any design money, I can't come back to the board with options. So, and I'll be glad to answer any questions on that. I just want to kind of give you you guys want information to help make these hard decisions, and there's a lot of building going on in Exit 31.
I think that probably bodes well with that you haven't locked in on property per se, that there's still options that you'll bring back to the board for final approval on where the Station 7 goes. Commissioner Compton?
Thank you, Mayor. I think just a couple things real quick. Are your vehicle replacement, are you following the fleet replacement standard operating procedures? Is that where this is coming from on your vehicles, Chief?
Absolutely. That's I work with Ryan's group every year, and every town vehicles score. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Another one is what you held up from the planning department. That's a good outline or look into the future for our expansion, not only your department, but every other department in this town. by what's on the planning board and what's coming on. And then lastly is Station 7, and I think you know, I'm gonna have trouble with annexing any property until your department gets on schedule, or some type of schedule where we annex something and then it's gonna be developed, whatever timeline after that, you need to be up and rolling with your vehicle and your men and equipment, for us to service that. Because I hear quite a bit about partnering with this agency, partnering with this department, and we can't do that forever. You already have a mutual aid. We've had for years a mutual aid agreement with surrounding agencies, and we just can't keep that up as we grow, because these other agencies, departments have their needs. You got yours, and yours is a priority on what we do right here. So you got a lot ahead of you. You got a lot on your plate to catch up with that piece of paper you held up on the future plans of this town.
Well, also, and that's a great point, just please understand that Station 6 that we're talking about that's sitting for you to be approved, we worked on that for almost 3 years. So it was almost 3 year from what I'm asking for Station 7. So you can imagine Lane Tree and Alcove in 3 years. We're allocating money for East-West Connector. We've got a grant for East-West Connector. If we wait 5, 6 years, we're so far behind. All I'm wanting to do is come into a design, give the board some options, and get a solution up. We are working with our county partners, and I'm going to continue working with them. There may be some opportunities down the road with some of those. But I've got to do some planning. These people on this list have been planning for way more than 5 years.
And I don't want you to have to wait that long, you know, to get what you need to service this area and take care of our citizens and property. Thank
Any
you.
other comments or questions? Thank you, Commissioner Compton.
Ma'am,
Yes, sir.
I have one on replacement of staff support vehicles. I know for the years that we always had some issues with our daycare using our rec center vans. And if I ain't mistaken, I kind of heard you say something about these vehicles going to be like for support when you need something. Have you ever decided about the fire department having their own van for taking your employees to training, where sometimes our staff and rec have to make 3 or 4 trips when their van is gone because other departments is using those vans? And I know rec is asking for a new van for the war memorial. So should any of those vehicles be replaced with a van for support for your training employees when you come back and forth to different events and stuff?
That's a great question, Commissioner Houston, and we do use the rec vans every now and then. The last year, we have just rented a van because we use it so infrequently. If we take, it might be 2 times a year. It's cheaper for us to rent the van from somewhere. We would love to have a van to be able to do that, but if we can buy a full-size SUV, we can at least get, you know, the majority of the people in several vehicles, or rent a van, which is really more economical at the end of the day.
Yeah, that was just my concern. I know during peak time in the summer, if vans get moved around and you got someone doing multiple trips to the school because the van is gone, pick up our kids and get them back to our centers, I think that's a little bit inconvenient for those people that's doing that travel time. So that's why I was asking, if these vehicles are just for support to get around, do they have to be, why can't it be a van that can be used even doing that? They just sit for support.
So, and I might have misunderstood you, Mr. Houston, but the vehicles that we're replacing, one of them is, or actually 2 of them are fire marshal vehicles. One of them is actually Commissioner Compton's Tahoe. How long have you been retired?
15 years this month.
So one of them was bought either right after he left or right. So we're going to move. When I say we're going to use them for moving around, the old vehicles will be left over. I think there'll be 2 out of the 3 that we're going to try to keep. One of them is not worth $600. So it does get moved up, and I'm sorry if I misspoke there. they're not gonna just sit. They're actually gonna be fire marshal's office and then our field comm vehicle, our communications vehicle it's been a battalion vehicle twice. So it's went down through like 3 hand-me-downs. I'm sorry.
I'm fine, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, my old vehicle had 35,000 miles on it 15 years ago. So you're still using it. You've got good use out of that one.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions for Chief? Commissioner West?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Deaton, I'm trying to figure out how to really pose this question, but aside from annexation, if you look at the timeline for the build out of Station 6, or when Station 7 would come along, and given the nature of the pandemic that we have before us right now, how confident are you that we can maintain that ISO 1 rating at least through the first 6 months of this budget cycle for 2021?
So we'll be able to maintain the ISO 1 for the first 6 months of this budget cycle. That's I'm fairly really confident in that, because they interview us and review us every 5 years. 5 years is coming up in a year and a half, I believe, and don't quote me to that, but it's about a year and a half they should be back in our doors. It's very important, and I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic. The pandemic has not changed my business at all. It's actually made it worse. It made it harder. It made it harder to serve our citizens. And we never stopped a thing during the pandemic. We never stopped doing anything differently. Actually, we put more workload on our people. You know, my gaps really are my FMLAs, my military deployments, my retirements, and then it takes me 6-8 months to get back up. So then the employees that I currently have working, you know, that they're fighting, there's 20-some people fighting for 1 or 2 spots to get off. That's where I'm lagging. And so by adding people incrementally through this, it was going to band-aid us over till Station 6 opens. That was the original plan. I know the economy is way different now than when we first developed this budget. So we've got the ISO is not in trouble for 6 months. We want to hold our own for that. The problem is we're always lagging behind growth. So as 500,000 square feet start coming out of the ground, then we end up having to catch up. It's going to take us 3 years to have a shovel-ready project, or at least 2, to have some options to bring back to the board to even ask to build anything. We've got a 4-acre site on Lane Tree Road right off the Transco that will fit a fire station perfectly, especially since one of these projects is the whole development of the front end of that. And a road runs right to the fire station property. Is there other options? Well, sure there is, but there's got to be some funds available to start a design. If that's something you want me to come back, as Mr. Hemans mentioned last night, come back with a budget amendment saying I need X amount for design, then so be it. I'll come back to you. But I think we've got to start working on plans.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure that you feel you have what you need out of this budget to at least carry us 6 months in, and then we can reevaluate where we're at with the funding, the impact from the pandemic, what that's been like for the sales tax, and maybe come back and readdress it. But just want to make sure you have what you have to keep that level of service as excellent as it is.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Whittington?
Chief, do you have to sign off on all annexation requests?
That's a great question, Ms. Whittington. I do have a comment, staff comment for every property that either gets water or is built in this town. And to Commissioner Compton's point, it's getting harder and harder to approve another $500,000 in this area, including the 2 million of growth that's going on right now. And keep, to Commissioner West's point, you got, Mr. Heeman talked about our call increases. As we plug more people in the city, we've got to have, the problem is not the first call. The problem is when we have the third call and the first call is still going on. That's where we're at. because we got 40,000 people, 40-some thousand people in this town, serving almost 80 at times with transient back and forth to work scenarios. And we get 2, 3, 4 calls at once, and then you get a fire on top of that, and that's where it gets us. So the building, you're gonna see more comments from me either, you know, I wouldn't recommend just keep building unless we start planning. And that's what I'm asking the board to consider.
Any other comments, commissioners, questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next up, we've got Chief Camperchani with the Police Department. I will remind you that yesterday that I mentioned the reason that you do not see additional officers in this budget is not because we don't need additional officers. It is because of the amount of time that it takes to fill those positions and the number of candidates available. I will tell you that we're going to be coming to you in a commissioner's briefing with some ideas that we've got that we want to do that we think will help with that process. So you'll be hearing that actually at your next commissioner's briefing. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief Camperchani.
Thank you, Mr. Heeman. So just to go down this list, I think is probably the easiest way to do this. So even though, if you see the reclassification here of a police detective position to a police sergeant, this is a direct result of that ISS report, not a recommendation from ISS. It was not a recommendation. However, there were some things that happened in that ISS report with the narcotics unit that, when I looked at it, is a direct result of them not having a direct supervisor that they have on a day-to-day basis. Narcotics units are hard to function if you don't have a day-to-day supervisor, just with drugs and money and forfeiture money. There are so many things and so many chances for things to happen that they need a direct supervision. So when we looked at this, we thought the best way to do that need without putting an additional burden on and asking for another position was to reclassify a position that's already there. So we wouldn't have to ask for a new position on that one. But I think it's imperative, and you know, I spent a number of my years working narcotics, and like I said, you need that direct supervision every day because of so many things. It's just such a dynamic working environment there that you need a supervisor all the time on something like that, especially in the units like that, and the one that functions here, because they're very busy, they do a lot of work, they need this direct supervision. So.
Comments or questions on that item?
Okay, the next thing is on-call legal counsel. This is something we started kicking around about 6 months ago. And just so you know, we haven't reinvented the wheel on this one. There are a number of departments, Sheriff's Department, Huntersville, Cornelius, Rowan County Sheriff, Tavares County Sheriff, they do the same thing. This is the contract services with a law firm that will be available to the officers on the street, the supervisors, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we did this in consultation with Sharon and the town manager. There's nothing to do about any type of issues with the town council here. It's just unique for us. Things happen, like I said, very dynamic. Sometimes we need answers at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning on a number of issues. I can tell you there's been a number of issues that have come up since this COVID stuff started. I'm trying to get daily updates from the Chiefs Association on this. The Chiefs Association of North Carolina also uses this firm that we're talking about contracting with. So that's the resource they're going to provide to us. In addition to, which I can tell you we need very badly, is they're going to give us a policies and procedure manual that's going to cover every single policy that we have. As I know some of you already know, we've been going through that policy manual. There are a lot of gaps and holes in the policies that we have, standard operating procedures that we're backing in this police department. quite frankly, before I got here, which we absolutely need. So we'll be able to take a look and get the best practices that are being done by throughout the state and organizations and police departments in the state and what they're doing. In addition to that, they will provide us with yearly updates, so we'll be right on top of any new court decisions or anything like that, any changes in the laws that come out. They will again give us that. We're gonna, with the continuedness of this contract, we will get those updates every year. For years, I guess, so you understand this, for years, this police department, I think, has followed had followed CALIA standards. And CALIA's fine, and we're gonna keep CALIA, and it's a great tool, but CALIA isn't necessarily the end all. CALIA is sort of a blanket, to make sure you're meeting certain benchmarks so you can attain your accreditation. It shouldn't be something you rely on your day-to-day activities of your police department, because it's just not that specific. They're more generalities, and I think there was a false sense of security here that we go for accreditation and we make it and everybody thinks it's okay. It's really not. And we found a number of holes in these policies. So this is a way to get everything in tune. I know the town manager, we've had many discussions on some policies here that, once they're held up to the light, they don't really work and they don't fit. So this is to fix that problem, fix it and move on so that we have a solid base for whatever we do in the future on this.
Comments or questions, commissioners? Commissioner West?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief Capitrani, on the department policy manual, I think you call out something that I thought was very important, and that's SOPs, which are the condensed, easily consumable documents that a law enforcement officer can use. And one thing I can tell you is I've seen our policy manual, and I think this is long overdue. I mean, it's going to be a little painful to get there, but I just want to call that out because while painful, that would immensely benefit our operational efficiencies in the police department, as well as how our officers conduct themselves in the field. So, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions on this item?
So the two telecommunicators positions, this is a direct result. If you look at the call numbers, it's interesting. The call numbers, calls for service, have not gone up in the last year. However, what has increased exponentially is the number of calls in from the street. And what I'm talking about is as you know, we funded the 4 traffic officers through that grant that this town has wanted for a number of years. And they're out there, they work all different hours. They're not set to the same hours. And they're stopping literally everything out there, every violation they see. They're very active. They make up, I believe our last numbers were, they make up now over 47% of all traffic stops in the whole department. So they're out there every night and every day, stopping people, running license checks, running warrants, doing all that stuff. Those have increased a number of times for the call takers. So now they have to listen to the radio, they have to run the plates from, do whatever they need in addition to answering calls. The other issue we've run into is that what we tried to do to get through it was we have put 2 of the dispatchers on a split shift so that they come in, the dispatchers work 6 to 6. We try to put them in, we put 2 in to work 12 to 12 to try to fill in the blanks on what we thought were the busiest times to try to alleviate asking for any more or trying to alleviate some of the call pressure. It's worked to a certain extent, but it hasn't worked that well, and they're really being overloaded in there. So there's two basically, the easiest way to look at this, because it took me a while to understand the shifts. It's almost like looking at like 2 sides of the street. So the 2 dispatchers, one will work on one side of the street, one will work on the other side of the street. Then we can have 3 dispatchers all the time. Anytime a dispatcher was sick, was out of work, vacation, anything like that, we were really down to 1.5. And a lot of times, the communications manager, who's running both records and communications, would have to come over and do that job. And she's been working for the past several months. If you look at her timesheet, she's been well in excess of 100 hours in the pay period for the last several months. And there's a burnout rate that I'm worried about in there. And so they just need the help because, like I said, we're getting busier. The police officers are out there, like I said, especially in that, the traffic unit has been very, very busy and it's putting more pressure on them. So these are the only positions we've really asked for. And I wouldn't have asked if we didn't need them. And those are the two we need because we sometimes forget, I think, about our telecommunicators up there and what they go through and the pressure that's on them. So this will go a long way to relieve that sort of, we're kind of at a precipice here on burnout in that place, and we want to try to alleviate that.
Comments or questions, commissioners? Commissioner Whittington?
Are these sworn police officers or just people like me?
Well, I don't know if they're all like you. They're non-sworn. They'll be telecommunicators, non-sworn positions. Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Compton?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I agree, your calls, just like the other chief stated, your calls have increased, definitely. So I do monitor you guys like I do the fire department and on the go all the time, very busy, so I can see why this is needed. How are you on patrol staff? I mean, how many officers are you down right now?
So we're down, I think we're down about 15 right now. We have 13 in the key right now to be hired. In fact, I have 4 coming in tomorrow to give conditional office employment to. So we're really working hard to get these numbers up. And just, Mr. Heeman alluded to it a little bit, but I think it's important, because I think it goes to your question, sir, too, about when we had initially looked at our budget last year, we were going to ask for 4 officers. And that was going to be to replace the 4 that we put into the traffic unit. And then we talked about, I said, I don't think we'll be able to fill these positions until probably August would be the time we'd probably be up this full complement, where we haven't been in a number of years. So I said, you know what, if we're going to ask for the 4, let's put it in the half-year budget. Let's not put the money in for those 4 positions until January. So that was the thought going into it. And then when this board actually decided upon raises for everybody across the board, I said, in fairness, we're not going to get these positions till half year. If we're at full complement, we can get through that half year. So I thought in fairness, on money-wise for the town and for what you've already done, I said, we can pull those off, because if we're at full staff, we can get through those 6 months and we'll come back next year. This is before this COVID stuff happened, but the thought was, we'll come back next year when everything's a little more settled down. I just have a real hard problem, I just don't like asking for more positions when we haven't filled the ones we have. I just think that sets a bad example. So I thought that one, in fairness, was the best way to handle it for everybody. So once we get up to your question, hopefully by August, once we get up to full staff, we'll be pretty good, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. That's what I wanted to hear you say, I guess. What I was wondering, no need asking for new officers. When you got openings right now, you got to fill first.
Right, exactly.
And then, if you're full complement this time next year, we may see officers in the budget, perhaps. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Commissioners, any other comments or questions?
So the last item is the Axon body camera stuff, which we had discussed in the 3-on-3 that we did. And basically the second year of this rollout calls for an additional $317,000 for that rollout. But, excuse me, just to, this is as a result of equipment, the body cameras, the in-car cameras that were just starting to fail us. Even though the system that was put in place was not that old, was only a couple years old. We're not getting the mileage out of it that we should. Additionally, 2 years ago, it should have been, this is all going to be cloud-based, so we're going to have direct access to it. It's not cloud-based now. And so it's very clunky, it's very cumbersome, it's very manpower intensive, just in order to pull a video out that we need. Supervisors literally have to go through hours and hours of videos to watch. I mean, they sit in their office, and when they could be doing other things, trying to pull up a video for either court or an internal thing, whatever it may be, it's just not a good process. By saving it to the cloud, which this is gonna do, we'll be able to have access to that stuff immediately, in addition to, right now we have a girl that has to download the videos, take them over to the DA's office, but this is, once we have this up and running, the DA's office is gonna be able to, we provide them with a link, they're gonna be able to go in, access that video that they want themselves, without accessing anything else. We will still control the access. They can go in, access it, get what they want. If they want it, if a defense attorney wants it, we can give it the same access to them. So it's gonna make it much easier, much more efficient. Quite frankly, this isn't something that this board should have had to come back to this early on, but I guess we are where we are. I know you've approved it, we've talked about it, but I think this is sort of the rollout with this. In addition to this, we're going with one company, that Axon has Taser, they bought Taser out, so they own Taser, and they own the body camera footage and car camera in-dash videos. They're supplying all our needs. We have a 2-year replacement on these cameras and tasers, and then there's a 5-year replacement on this, so we're gonna get new equipment. Right now, we don't have that luxury if one goes down. We have a box of dash cam and car cam videos that are useless. We can't do anything with them, we can't fix them, we can't restore them, there's nothing we can do. It was just a bad system. So this will be much better. And even though it's an upfront cost, it's gonna be much cheaper and much more efficient as the years roll out on this.
Commissioner Compton?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, this is year 2 of 5. Should we expect roughly the same amount for the next 3 years?
Well, in years 3 to 5, it talks about another 409,000, I have here a total, it says in my notes, years 3 to 5, 409. So that's what you can expect in the next, from the 3 to 5 year, the 409,000, a little more than that.
Okay, just want to know what to expect for the future, but it's things definitely needed. So thank you for the explanation.
Mr. Qualls?
How quickly are you gonna be able to transition to this better system?
It's pretty seamless. We're gonna be doing it as soon as it's in place. We've got some now that we're already working with the Axon reps now, starting to get this stuff in. So there's no really changeover. In fact, we can't really incorporate one to the other. So the changeover is pretty seamless, and we're starting to do it now. We're starting to roll out now. They're starting to come in. We have meetings next week with the Axon reps. They're showing us their products, showing us how to do the stuff we can do. The other good thing about this, we can do a lot of this stuff. We get taught how to do it. We can do a lot of it in-house. We don't have to call them and pay for a rep to come out if we have a problem. We're teaching our own people how to troubleshoot any things that may come up.
Any other comments or questions on this item or for the chief? Great, thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Compton?
Chief, I see under other equipment, the speed alert radar message sign. I'm glad that's in there because there were one being used. I don't know what happened to it. Y'all had one once upon a time.
We did. Okay.
And I don't know what happened to it. But anyway, people were asking me, back when it was being used around town, different places, people were asking me, how can I get that in my neighborhood? How can I get that? I was asked that a number of times, which I just referred citizens to the police department. So glad to see that back on there. I think it's very beneficial. It makes people feel at ease on certain streets when there's speeders that hopefully will slow them down.
It does, thank you. And just in that same vein, I don't know what they had here in the past, but this one too, the other thing is it also downloads the data for us. It'll connect right to our computer, so we'll be able to download. So it's more than just, I know it's a deterrent, I think it's a great deterrent, I agree with you on that, but it also is gonna provide us with the data, so we have it out on some street or couple of streets for, say, a 2-week period. We extrapolate the data from it, so now we remove it and we put it in another area, but we have the data now. Now we can put sort of cops on dots, sort of the old saying. Now we can put the traffic guys out there because now they have the data that between 3 and 5 p.m. on Tuesdays and Wednesdays is when the speeds seem to increase. So there's another good component, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's nothing that I was gonna prepare to talk about, but just so you understand, that's what we're doing with this. It downloads directly into our computer base, and we can look at it and see the speeds, and like I said, we take it out of the area, people think it's on, oh, it's not up anymore, no, we're gonna be there next time, so.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I'm glad to see that. I'm glad your explanation on how it's going to work. That's even better. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to Ryan. He's got all his departments in the queue.
Thank you, Manager Heeman. What I'd like to start off with is am I in charge of the slides, or is Deanna? Go ahead, you can go ahead, Randy.
I'll put your mic up a little bit closer.
So what I'd like to start off with is the Public Services Administration slide. This slide is where we house a lot of the debt that was acquired in order to build the op center and the fleet building that you know. Quick fact is that our new operations center will turn 10 years old next year. So that's amazing to me that that's how old this facility is, but it still looks brand new to us. So as part of our maintenance that we are going to do with this facility, you'll see one of my highlights is that the seal and stripe the front parking lot at the op center. Much like what you've heard in public safety where they phase things over 1, 2, 3, and 4 years, I anticipate that being the exact same thing that we're going to do. Let's get the front facing part of it done, and we'll look at the different segments, and we'll be doing that to maintain our paved surfaces there. The other thing is, as a highlight, is a feel-good story. I don't know if many of you have even met her yet, but we have Amy Smith that helps out over the lunch hours at the town of Mooresville Op Center, and she works 3 hours a day, disabled individual, and that's exactly what she's looking for, but this will be going on her 3rd year. So much like what you've seen the golf course and Park and Recs do, there's a place for Allegiance, but it's not for long-term part-time employees. And Ms. Smith's not looking for any additional hours, but we love her and we want to keep her around. So this is a way that she can make a little bit more money, but in the end of it, we save some money too because we're not paying the upcharge on Allegiance. So feel good story there that we'd like to keep Ms. Smith on board for the foreseeable future. So with that, I just want to give a recap of public services and to let you know how far it's grown. We are a division of approximately 148 employees. It's interesting to me that of those 148 employees, it's literally right down the middle, 74 and 74 general fund and utility / enterprise funds. So 74 of these employees are the general funds that Mr. Heeman's talked about, but you're also going to see this evening that we're going to discuss public utilities, which is a $34.6 million budget. We also have a stormwater enterprise fund, that's 1.6, a POW bill that's 1 million, and then $12 million in public services. So there's a lot of numbers, but the reason why I'm bringing those numbers up is, to this point, with all the other divisions that you and departments that you've heard 50% of the budget. From this point on, you're going to hear the other 50% of the budget. So we take that responsibility very seriously, that all told that we're about 65 million with all our project ordinances and capital reserves and everything like that. And we take that responsibility very serious. So when we talk about projects tonight like East-West Connector, the Mill Village, the fleet expansion, pavement program, we understand that there's a ton of zeros behind that, but I wanted to make sure that too often I think you can hear too much from Randy and I want you to hear the requests from the actual department heads so they can defend their requests, but they also can answer your detailed questions that you have. Does that make sense how we're going to roll through this? So with that, I'm going to bring Ms. Kraft up to talk about her utilities budget. And she will also then go through a water sewer, the treatment plants, and conclude with wastewater treatment plant. So with that, Ms. Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Am I driving or are you Somebody's driving, not me. Okay. Good evening. Just a quick overview of the Utility Enterprise Fund. Just a few adjustments here from fiscal 20 to fiscal 21. First off, you'll see that the professional services has increased by about $800,000. That's primarily due to the money that we've set aside for utility relocations for NC 150 and Williamson Road. The reason that those specifically are in the budget is because the board has approved agreements with DOT and we expect those to be executed and returned to us. So we've made a financial obligation to DOT to pay those. So we've taken a stance that as we get to that point with the project, we're going to put them on the books. Now, when those payments are due, in terms of how the projects are scheduled, or even during that project when we receive an invoice, we're not sure, but we want to make sure that we have that money accounted for and we don't kind of forget about it over time. We did have money set aside last fiscal year, just in case. That was $1 million and that wasn't spent. We didn't receive any invoices for NC 150. Debt service is reduced, you'll see, by about 12%, and that was due mainly to the refinancing of the revenue bonds that Mrs. Hockett handled for us. And then the capital outlay has decreased fairly significantly, and that was because last year's budget included the US 21 connector road water lines. So they are finishing up on that project on US 21 now. That was a $3 million budget line item as a capital project last year, and we just don't have something that large in a one-year capital project this year. And then you'll see transfers moving up at the very bottom. And that also is due to a capital project. That is taking the remaining money that we feel we need based on a 90% construction cost estimate for the Wiggins Road pump station and pipelines, which we've been talking about for a number of years. And if you'll remember, that is the sewer project that was designed to accommodate the growth in the industrial park and really the general northeast section of town. And two things that I just wanted to point out to you that aren't necessarily in this year's budget. One, we are finishing up the rate study for this coming fiscal year, and there will be no rate increase recommended from the Utilities Department. And really, we're looking at that being the case for the next 5 years as we look at a 5-year projection plan through that process. On the backside of that, the board has approved our water and wastewater comprehensive master plan, and so we're starting to work on that project with HDR. I do anticipate that that is going to give us a roadmap for future projects, so we're going to see more projects coming forward. And as Kurt Deaton said, as Chief said, we are constantly trying to stay ahead, ideally stay ahead, sometimes chase development and growth. And it's the same thing with utilities. These are large projects. We know this. We want to make sure that we stay ahead of those as we move forward. So I just say that in anticipation as we move forward. And we have that report completed next year. We will probably have some more projects that we need to do in order to poise ourselves to meet the demand as we move forward. Okay, so water sewer administration, and this is a little bit of a repeat of what we just talked about. Highlights primarily is the construction of the Wiggins Road pump station, force main and outfalls. We actually did hope to have that awarded by now, but we did have to make some alignment changes based on available right-of-way on NC 801. And then that added some additional easement acquisition to the project, and so we're still working through that final easement acquisition. Unfortunately, right now with the COVID-19 situation, that's been a little bit more difficult because certain groups can't meet together to approve easement transfers to the town based on restrictions on numbers in a room. And then the utility relocations for Williamson Road widening and 150, and that's about $1.5 million between those two.
Any comments or questions, commissioners, on those two highlights?
Meter reading department, we are really just keeping on in this department. The meter reading group obviously reads, rechecks, maintains meters in our system. They install new meters as new development occurs. We have a fairly significant reduction in our budget this year, and that's because the ERT replacement project was completed this past year, and ERTs are encoder receiver transmitters. I had to Google that. It actually is a copyrighted word through ITRON, but anyway, we had gone through a project the last couple of years to take all of these readers, and what these do is they transmit the information from the meter to an antenna on the truck when we read. So we can read the entire town in 3 days with 4 people by driving by. The old ERTs just did that. They just transferred that information from point A to point B. The new ones that we are putting in can record additional information, so we can go back if somebody calls, for instance, and says that they have a high water bill. We can go back and download information from that ERT and show them that maybe they were fine, they were normal, and then all of a sudden on a certain day they had a spike. They can go and try to look for a leak potentially. Sometimes people say, oh yeah, I saw that my toilet was running all weekend. It kind of gives them a little bit of context on what the issue was, and we can help them pinpoint if there is a problem on their end, what it is. So it's a really great customer service tool, so we're really glad to have that implemented across town.
Comments, questions, Commissioner Compton?
Thank you, Mayor. Mrs. Kraft, how many readers do you read in 3 days? How many?
We currently have, I want to say, pushing 17,000 accounts.
Wow, thank you.
Okay, and moving on to line maintenance. Again, you see a very significant decrease in our request, and that again is because of the water line project on Connector Road and US 21. And that wasn't put into a capitalized account because we were able to complete that work within 1 fiscal year. But the highlights under line maintenance is we are replacing 4 vehicles due to their rating through the fleet department. They're all 15s, I believe, 2 F-150s and 2 service trucks. We are requesting 1 new position, a senior line maintenance mechanic. Currently, our right-of-way crew, the folks that maintain off-road outfalls, ensure that there's not trees growing within our easements, keep everything cleared, make sure that we can access our sewers when we need to do inspections. That's a crew of 2. And the amount of pipelines that we have added to our system has put us in a position where we just can't keep up. We cannot mow on the schedule that we need to. We've had areas that we can't access in the case of an emergency. So we really need to have an additional person on that crew to keep up with the additional off-road sewer and water line rights-of-way that are installed. And the other benefit of that is a 2-person crew, when they can't mow rights-of-way, when it's raining, when there's something else going on that they just can't do that work, they're really not well utilized. A crew of 3 can go out and make repairs, can do some other construction type work. A crew of 2 really just can't. So I think this is going to make them a lot more valuable when they're not mowing. But quite frankly, they're going to be mowing all the time unless we've had 4 inches of rain the day before. And the other 2 highlights that you'll see here are design projects for 2 pipelines. The first one is a design of the South Iredell Force Main relocation. The South Iredell Pump Station is located up kind of back behind Carolina Beverage. That backs up to the creek where Pecan Hills is on the opposite side. That force main, that pump station currently pumps to a gravity sewer on NC 115, which eventually goes to the Reeds Creek pump station and then pumps back across the hill. So Reeds Creek also takes all of the western portion of town. So it is, by volume, our largest pump station in our system. Meanwhile, the Wiggins Road pump station that we're requesting a transfer for to be able to do the construction this year has been deliberately sized to accommodate that South Iredell force main, or South Iredell pump station, at some point in the future. So we want to start this design and have it ready to implement that work, to kind of reroute the flow from one place to the other. So that does a couple things. That kind of shortens the amount of time that South Iredell flow is in the pipe. The other thing that it does is it frees up space on the Reeds Creek pump station for additional growth on the western side of town. Hopefully it will address some other issues there that maybe are a little bit of a result of flow. But I think that's going to be a very good strategic project for us in the future, just to kind of globally manage our system. And then the last project here, you'll see design of the Business Park East water line. A couple of years ago, we worked with WK Dickson on a water study to look at how do we ensure an appropriate amount of water flow and pressure to the industrial park, with there being so many large users in that one area, and with our anticipation of additional growth in the new business park. And that study came about with 5 different projects. The first one being the water line that's currently under construction and finishing up. The second being the booster pump station that the board approved, I believe, in March, and they'll start working on that actually on Monday at the water treatment plant. And the next project is this Business Park East water line. So this is going to connect the water line kind of gap between the new industrial park and basically where Niagara is today on Mooresville Boulevard. Ultimately, this is going to boost the pressure in that whole area, including the new business park, and it will also provide additional water supply to that area so that we can be confident that we can supply the needs of new industries that come in town.
Commissioners, any comments or questions on those highlights? Thank you, Council.
Pump maintenance, everybody's favorite. We have a number of projects at pump stations that are maintenance projects. We're requesting money for new bar screens at the north side and South Iredell pump stations. So again, South Iredell is back behind Carolina Beverage. The north side pump station is off of 801, south of 150. That takes flow from Cherry Grove, Wellesley. It does take Niagara's flow, Berry Plastics, a number of, half of the industrial park and a lot of other areas. These are older pump stations, and currently they have what we call manual bar screens in there. What the pump crew has to do is go out there literally with a rake, and at Northside twice a day, every day, 7 days a week, no matter holidays, whatever, and physically take that and pull the things off of that bar screen that folks inadvertently or on purpose flush down the toilet. It's not pleasant. It's not particularly sanitary, and this has been something that we've been moving through over time and adding new automatic screens to different stations. The last one we put in was at McCrary Creek and Morrison Plantation. What these do is they're on a traveling rack, and they just continually rotate, and then they compress water out of whatever debris they collect, and it gets put into a dumpster, and then we just have BFI or somebody come in and take the dumpster. So it's a lot more sanitary, it's a lot safer. So that's something that we're moving through and doing at a multitude of pump stations. The next one is wet well rehabilitation at, again, South Iredell Pump Station and Reeds Creek. And I think most everybody knows that Reeds Creek is at the back side of the golf course. It's a corrosive atmosphere in the kind of the bowl where the pumps pump the sewage out and move it on to the next location. So over time, that concrete has to be cleaned, it has to be resurfaced, inspected, some metal work and things like that done. So those 2 pump stations are on the list for that. And lastly, replacement of 1 crane truck, and we're actually going to be able to use the crane truck at the wastewater treatment plant. They don't need anything that goes off-road and drives the miles that the pump crew does. They just need something that's on site to be able to pull equipment. So that's going to be a really good repurpose of that truck, even though it's got a fairly high number in terms of the fleet department. It'll definitely be able to serve a purpose and be valuable still for another few years.
Mr. Qualls?
How many more pump stations do we need to replace the automatic screen?
I'm thinking through in my head, and I'm traveling the road. Lake Norman, probably only maybe about 2 more, because these are only for the large stations. So out of the 50 some odd stations that we have currently, most of them are below ground. These are just the ones that are large building. So we have been doing them for a number of years. So I think we only have a couple more to do.
It'll be good to have all those done. And I'm glad to see in the budget, money for the odor control at stations. To help that hopefully.
We spend a lot of money on odor control.
Commissioners, any other comments or questions? Commissioner Compton?
Thank you, Mayor. On the bar screens that were just mentioned, those dollar amounts are pretty staggering. How often does that take place? For the ones you have listed here?
How often do we replace them? They'll just be maintained. We'll put one in once, and then it will be good for a long time.
So this 1.3 doesn't happen very often then? I'm on page 271.
I got my budget sitting here.
300,000, 400,000, 600,000 for the
Right.
3 different ones.
So we actually had, no, they do not happen very often. North side bar screen, the north side bar screen is a little bit more difficult because of the layout of that station. So there's structural work that has to be done in order to get the screen in. Other places, there's 2 channels, you can just drop it into one and you're good to go. It's kind of why north side has continued to fall down the list because we weren't quite sure how we were going to be able to do it. It's just gotten to a point where it, like I said, 2 times a day, Monday through Sunday, all the time, or we're concerned about there being an issue. The wet well rehab, we actually advertised the Reeds Creek wet well rehabilitation this year. We had it budgeted for this year. We contacted numerous contractors. We really beat the bushes to get people to come out. We ended up having one person bid it, and it was 50% higher than the engineer's estimate, which was 50% higher than our original estimate. So we said, we can't do that. So we're trying to package and bundle things up together to get a little bit more interest. Unfortunately, the wet well rehabilitation is, it's just not something that anybody wants to do for obvious reasons. There's a lot of risk to it. There's a lot of confined space. There's bypass pumping. Sometimes
Which is why it's a high price tag. I got it now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Houston?
Go back to the South Island Station, talking about over control, and we have, you know, we need a lot of folks. That help with the flow, about the flow, because it's standing glass for so long, by the time you get there, so the smell pretty excessive.
Yep.
With these new rerouting and taking some of the flow off the South Island, would that help maybe make that flow a little bit better for those customers down by the golf course?
I'm hoping that it will. And when we add odor control, it's funny, the place that it smells bad is not the place that you add odor control. You add it upstream for exactly that reason, because the longer it sits in the pipe, the more sulfuric acid and smell is built up. And then by the time it gets to that next location and hits the air, that's when people smell it. So when we're adding odor control, we certainly have the ANUA system at Reeds Creek, but we're really cognizant of adding it to all the stations upstream. So when we get a complaint about odor, generally the first thing that they do is go to Lake Norman and McCreary Creek and South Iredell and other places to make sure that something's not out of order at those locations first. So I really do hope that will help with that. Yes, sir.
Any other comments or questions on this section, Commissioners?
Moving on to water treatment. So our highlights here, you'll see that we are requesting a new position, and that is an operator trainee. We have one operator who is slated to retire next month, and we have at least 2 more who could within the next year. When an operator leaves, whether they retire, they leave for another position or what have you, we have to double up shifts. We have to ask people to come in for overtime. We have one relief operator who is limited to 1,000 hours a year because he's retired out of the state system. So we feel like rather than wait until that point that somebody retires again, and then have to find somebody and hope to find somebody that's actually certified already, we want to bring somebody in that we can train up, and we're fine with them not having an operator's license. We can train them and get them certified so that we kind of have somebody in the hopper, so to speak, so that when that happens, we're not in a pinch. And then we have a filter rehabilitation at treatment plant 2. As Mr. Race commented about the operations center being 10 years old, the new water treatment plant is about a year or two older than that. So we're hitting the point at which we have some of these regular maintenance activities. And again, regular maintenance means once every 10 years. So they're not, these large annual things, but we do plan on doing a filter rehabilitation at treatment plant 2. We've actually had somebody come in and do an assessment. They were here last week, so we'll get the report from them with what their recommendations are to do in that filter for next year. And then we also have security fencing at the elevated storage tank on NC 150 by Allison Park, and also exit 33 down at 115 in Fairview. Both of those are open elevated storage tanks. They really should have some security to them. We have folks parking there, sometimes Uber drivers and things like that. Any water facility is considered a federally protected site, so we really want to make sure that we have those protected. And actually, along with that, I'll mention, and it's not listed in the highlights, and I probably should have done it, under professional services for water treatment, you'll see, I want to say it's $150,000 for an AWIA report or assessment. That's the America's Water Infrastructure Act. That's a federal mandate for all water systems in the country to go through and do basically a vulnerability assessment. So we have to look at, let me back up. After 9/11, there was a similar requirement put out for water systems, and that was really just focused on terrorist activity, because that was what was on the forefront of everybody's mind. It was a one-time report, everybody did it, implemented a couple things, and then it kind of sat off to the side. Now the federal government has come back and said, well, that was a good idea, but we need to build on it. We want everybody to do a full vulnerability assessment, so we're looking at natural disasters, terrorist attacks, vandalism, cybersecurity. We're having a look at the entire gamut of our water system. And then we have to, after we've done that and identified whatever weaknesses we have, and I'm sure everybody in the country will have some, we have to then put together an emergency response plan. So we have to show how are we going to deal with those things when they come about. Pandemic is one of the things too on the list, interestingly enough. So that's also in the budget. We are required to submit this by, I believe, the summer of 2021. So we're moving forward on that, and then we'll have to update it every 5 years and show that we're kind of moving towards having a more secure system in whatever way that we can.
Any comments or questions, commissioners? Commissioner West?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Kramer, that filter rehabilitation on the water treatment plant 2, that's in here, 200,000 and another 250,000 for repair and maintenance. Is that because of the age? Is it annually that we do that? So I recall that in there last year.
The repair and maintenance?
Yeah, and the filter rehabilitation.
The filter rehabilitation actually was in there last year, and you really have to have the filter manufacturer come back and do the assessment and the rehab. Well, he was always booked. So we finally got him to come out last week for the assessment. So we just went ahead and pushed it to next fiscal year. It's one of those things where we really can't go out and bid that service because we need the people that put it in, since it is proprietary, to take a look at it. The other rehabilitation, or the repair, 200,000, that's small things that are planned, and that's big things that are unplanned. I mean, we can have a high service pump, or our high service pumps experience some vibration. A couple months ago, we had to have Underwood come and pull it, and he had to bring a flatbed truck and 4 guys to come and pull this thing. It's probably gonna cost us, I don't know. So some of these large pieces of equipment just have zeros to them, unfortunately. So we want to make sure that we have money budgeted to address it if it happens. And something will break.
Goal on something always breaks.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions on this section?
Lastly, wastewater treatment. The wastewater treatment plant went through a assessment probably about 2 years ago. We called it an efficiency assessment. Basically, we just wanted to go through, have a new set of eyes. We had gone through a couple different managers and some change in leadership there. Just have a new set of eyes come in and give us some ideas on how we can maintain our equipment better. Are there things that are coming up on a point where we need to make some decisions, make some repairs? What can we do better? What's different? And they came back with a number of things operationally that we've changed that have really, really helped us run better. But another one of the things that they suggested in there was our effluent disc filters to start replacing those. Again, those were put in with the 2 million gallon a day expansion, and it's 10 years old, over 10 years old. So those filters last 10 years. So we're going through the process of replacing one at a time, and they're around $250,000 a piece to go and do. Clarifier resurfacing and metal rehab. The clarifiers are those round tanks that are just kind of calm looking tanks. That's where everything starts to settle out, all the sludge settles out to the bottom, and then it's kind of scraped off. It's a corrosive environment, so every so often they need to be drained, inspected, the metal cleaned. You really don't know what you got until you drain them down, and draining them down makes everybody nervous because now you're down to one at a time to operate your plant. So it's time this year to go ahead and get that work done, and so that's a fairly large dollar amount, but you're draining half of your treatment plant's capacity at one time to go and do inspection and resurface and hire experts that can get it done and get out and get it filled back up again. And then, I guess I just went bottom to top, but replacement tractor and skid steer. So the tractor was vintage 1992, 93, I think. I think we've squeezed all that we can out of it. And then the skid steer is used to push around the sludge on the drying beds. So we have to have a special one that's not tracked, it's got to be wheeled. And here again, ours is just, it's hit its number, so to speak, from the fleet department.
Comments or questions? Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to comment, we have an ongoing conversation with me and Allison, whether it's going to be 4 or 5 zeros after anything that she brings to me. And then this evening, 34 millions never went so quick. That's what you just spent with Allison talking there in her department there. So it's high dollars when you deal, and I think a lot of you, your questions picked up on that. This isn't a set of tires that's $800 or $1,000. You're talking 4 or 5 zeros behind anything like that. And I wish I could say that those dollar amounts are going down, but John Young, our engineering director, will be giving you his engineering budget request and the stormwater budget request. He said he would only do his presentation, though, if I first made you guys swear that you would not ask about the delivery of any NCDOT projects, because he does not know those, and he is not going to compromise his integrity by throwing out any dates that will change as of tomorrow. So with that, Mr. Young, go ahead.
That is true. So Mr. Race is speaking truth there. It seems like every day we get something new. Commissioner Qualls can probably attest to some of those. She continues to ask, and I continue to say, you know what, I'm not sure. Yesterday it was this, today it's something else. So we will start, obviously, with the engineering budget. You kind of see a little bit of an increase there, 40%. I say we spend everybody else's money. We don't really have money. In this case, we actually are requesting a few items. These items were items we talked about at the board retreat, if you remember. Number one on the highlights list there is the traffic study for Lane Tree Road area. If you remember from our board retreat, that was from Alcove Road roughly to the intersection of the new east-west connector phase 1. And just kind of give you an idea of where we are on that. We actually have put out an RFQ for services. We received 27 back, which is the most I've ever gotten back. Those are 20-page RFQs, so myself, Cammie Weckerly, and Erica Martin are currently going through those. There's a lot of good ones, and just kind of gives you an idea of where the NCDOT projects are. Most of these consultants that are putting in for these type of projects were NCDOT consultants. And so I was actually on the phone with a fairly large consultant yesterday, and that was basically what he said. We've been dropping on a lot of projects. Their CEI teams are not doing work, and so I think it's going to help us. It's going to benefit us in the long run, but just kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. So our goal on that project and the next one we'll talk about is, assuming the budget goes through and everything works, we would be letting that to one of those pre-qualified firms. East-West Connector Phase 2, another project we talked about at the board retreat. That preliminary design, if you remember, this project is from the extent of 115 where East-West Connector Phase 1 meets 115 to Shears Road, basically at the intersection of Rocky River and Shears Road. That is what we call Phase 2 effectively. Again, another project that was talked about at the board retreat, that would be another project that we'd be looking at one of these consultants to help us on. And the goal of that project, if you remember, was to get to roughly what we call a 25% design, so we could really start directing that development in that area. We're getting a lot of development requests. In fact, we have one right now we're looking at just across the road from the intersection of 115, that one, and East-West Connector Phase 1. And then there's fairly large properties along that corridor that we really want to be able to give these folks guidance, especially related to what is that road going to look like in the future and where there going to be intersections. So definitely a good project, and we certainly want to be on the front side, kind of like we talked about tonight on a lot of things, obviously with the fire station and Ms. Kraft talking about some of the utility design. And then the last one on there highlighted, Langtree 115 actually will be on, the agreement is actually on our board agenda coming up on Monday night. So we'll be talking about this one again tomorrow. We did receive roughly $5 million, well, technically $4 million of CRTPO money, DA funding, as I think somebody's been requesting and talking about over the last couple of days, and then $1 million match. This money that we're requesting, let me drop back. That money's actually spread out within the STIP over about 4 years technically, if we go from FY21. But FY21 has the design in it for NCDOT STIP. FY23 has the right-of-way purchase in it, and then FY25 has construction. That may sound like a lot of time, and you're like, there's no way we're going to get there, but Commissioner West and all of us will remember how long it's taken to get 115 and 801 and all these projects to move forward. It takes time. So they're really realistic numbers, but this year, so the goal with next year will be to have that design in place, and then we'll be, moving forward with right-of-way and things like that on that project. Again, the agreement will be on the board agenda for tomorrow night, and that agreement is roughly $5 million. And then I did want to talk about one other item related to that, and it actually relates to our bond. So in the past, all these projects were bond projects. If you remember, in 2014, we actually had a list of bond projects, and our intersection improvement projects then were actually part of that. So we were paying the 20% with proceeds from those bonds. We've now exhausted those monies. Our last project will be West Wilson, which will be starting hopefully at the end of this year. We've got a couple of pieces of right-of-way to purchase there. But that was going to exhaust roughly about the last $2.5 million of our bond proceeds that we have left. So that's why you're seeing it in a budget now for design, and then you'll see right away our 20% coming up in 2023, and then obviously the construction in 2025. And then the one thing I did want to point out on this, that number you see jump up, 262,000 of those are in those highlights. So those three items right there are covering basically the 40% you see increase in our budget. And then the last item I did want to touch on before is Deborah asked me, it will appear that there is a new position in engineering. There is not. It's GIS specialist who we lost back in April, Zach Carr. was being paid for out of utilities. It's getting moved to engineering, and then we're just going to be transferring the funds from utilities over to pay for it. It was originally coming out of, but so it's not a new position. It's just been moved back over into engineering and been transferred. If that makes sense.
Comments or questions, commissioners? Thank you, Jonathan.
We'll move into stormwater. So it's enterprise fund. We are, you can see the numbers there. We do have a little bit of a jump in this year's budget. We'll talk about that here in a few minutes of why we have that. Last year's budget is around $1.5 million, just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. We have a couple of projects that are actually happening and will be starting here in the near future. We've got a project on North Church Street that should begin about mid-May. We did finally finish up Mill Village Phase 1, thankfully, this past year. Still working through the final stages of that. But that kind of brings us into this year's budget. The goal, obviously, in stormwater, Ryan and I always joke about stormwater. One of the things, he'll always ask me, he says, well, what's important to people? And the important thing to people is, one, you're going to fix my problem if I have one, and number two, that you're making projects happen out in the field. It's not necessarily some of the other items that we would see, like an MPDS permit or whatever. It's important to get things happening. So our goal with this year's budget is to start doing that. We have a little bit of a fund balance. So you can see about a $300,000 increase in our projects for this year, or our budget, and those are all in basically capital projects. So you got North Maple culvert replacement. So North Maple is actually right beside the War Memorial. We have some flooding that occurs in that area when we have storms. So that's actually a misnomer for North Maple culvert replacement. We're actually just going to parallel the pipe, so we're going to go in and put an additional pipe in that corridor. It does require some property purchase, just one property actually, but we will be working on that project next year. Mill Village Phase 2, you see that one in there. One of the things I have requested and talked to Ryan about is pushing that one off for a little bit of time. For lack of a better term, I'd like to give folks a break. And if you remember what Phase 2 is, it's actually Ridge, Keesler, Nesbitt, the rest of Summer, which is across Raleigh, and then Mills Avenue on the opposite side, right there at College Street. So that's the last part of what we call Mill Village in that area. It's a lot smaller project than it was before. And then what we did kind of here, this money that you see in your budget is obviously not for the whole project. If you remember in Phase 1, we actually split up dollars. So we had some bond funds going into doing the street work. We actually had utility funds going into doing the water and sewer rehabilitation. And then we've got stormwater going into rehabilitating stormwater in those. So there's actually 3 funds that are funding the Mill Village work. It's a little bit challenging, I'll admit, from a finance standpoint and tracking, but we got it to work, and so that's the goal on this one as well, in Mill Village Phase 2, and then hopefully we'll have that project wrapped up. Like I say, it's going to be a lot less invasive project, and there's a lot more outlets for people to get in and out of that than there were on this particular, the first phase. We do have a new stormwater crew position. That was a recommendation in our original rate study, which I'll actually talk about that in a few minutes, but our original rate study and the way we set our rates, if you look at the guidelines that were put in place about 5 years ago, we actually we're supposed to be at 2 full crews by now. We have not necessarily seen the need for that, but we are trying to get this crew position, and it will be a full crew at that point. So a full crew related to streets and or utilities is 4 people, and then you have a maintenance supervisor. So we had a maintenance supervisor 2 years ago, and then this year we'll have a new crew position. I think it's going to be a Tech 1. And so that crew will be filled up at that point and be able to, we're actually utilizing them on 2 fronts where they're doing not only maintenance, but they also go out and do inspections on our BMPs and help with the stormwater, interior administration stormwater as well. And then we do have a new mini excavator on there. The mini excavator we've been utilizing for the last 5 years is actually one the street department had. Still functions. It's just getting a little age on it. Again, I don't remember exactly what it ranked in the fleet. I believe it was a 15. So we are looking to replace that. I think that's a $60,000. That's a smaller excavator. That's not a large one. That's just your little mini bucket. One thing I did want to point out about stormwater as well, we are, I forgot one highlight on there, but I'll tell you, we did just complete the rate study. I think Ms. Kraft talked about the one for water and sewer as well. So we program that every 5 years, and we've got a rate study that is complete, and there's no recommendation for raising that ERU rate on stormwater. So for the next 5 years, we're still looking at the same thing we've had this past 5 years. And then I did miss the curb and gutter replacement. One thing we added this year, and we're going to have it in the next 5 years, is some curb and gutter replacement throughout town. And this, for example, you see several streets, but one of the ones we're looking at next year is Glenwood Avenue. Commissioner Compton that lived over there probably knows there were some rough areas of on the curb and gutter in there. Some of those are older sections of town, and so we're trying to get that curb and gutter really in good shape and moving that stormwater as best possible.
Commissioners, any comments or questions? Commissioner Compton.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Young, you mentioned Phase 2, Mill Village, possibly put it on hold. Please don't put it on hold too long. As you know, relatives there, you live there, that neighborhood was on hold for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
So to finish it up, let's finish it up and not put them off too long. However, I do understand, I give them a break. I get that, because they drove through mud and crap for the last couple of years, and they don't need much more of that. But just keep the wheels turning on that project. Let's get that over with, and we can all be proud.
Absolutely. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Young. Next department head that will be coming forward is Chris Wyckoff, the newest member of Public Services. We are in the process right now of transitioning his department over to the Ops Center. They will be taking the bay right next to the traffic bay that's currently at the Ops Center. It's definitely an upgrade from the double carport there next to the War Memorial where they've been living for the last 2 years. So we definitely will see a benefit from the center, but we also see a benefit. You've heard me talk about this several times. It's a lot easier to communicate with somebody when they're right across the hall versus right across the street or right across town. So we do believe that Chris and his crew is going to see a big benefit of being around the water and sewer and our public works folks. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris to do his department request.
Good evening. You can see that our increase is relatively small. We've got them highlighted here this year in our operational costs, and both of them are consolidations from, you would have found those numbers in various budgets throughout the town at different locations. So the janitorial contracts we had out for the police department, the library, the golf buildings and the operations center. So we consolidate that contract and manage that. And the same thing with the consolidation of the townwide alarm and security monitoring that we do through Sage Services. We consolidated that. So again, those are two numbers that you would have seen throughout the budgets in different locations. And as Mr. Race mentioned, we are relocating. We're currently in the process of relocating to the Ops Center.
Any comments or questions? Chris. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Last but not least, we'll have John Finan come up and cover the public works departments that are under his supervision. I do want to publicly thank John for coming up with what he called a crazy idea of, with the pandemic, taking that opportunity to pave Main Street. Great idea. I know that all of you have had the chance to drive Main Street. It turned out absolutely spectacular. I hope you guys feel the exact same way, but that was John's idea, and I want to give him kudos for coming up with something to take that opportunity. With that, John, go ahead.
Thank you. And thanks again for saving the best for last again this year. We appreciate this. So with sanitation, there's a little bit of an increase there. It's mostly with the two positions. We have one position of an equipment operator one and a sanitation tech. Those two positions will go to the new rear loader that's also in the budget. This will be for a new route. We, over almost the past 2 years, we've been running 3 side loaders every day. And then we have a rear loader that sweeps behind the side loaders to pick up anything outside the can, bag trash, bulky items, anything that doesn't fit in the can. So the 2 rear loaders have just been kind of splitting up the 3rd side loader route and covering it for them. So this will put 3 rear loaders behind our 3 side loaders. And then we'll also be replacing one of our side loaders. Okay, so I was asked to give just a little bit of information about what's going on in the department right now because of the COVID crisis. So obviously everybody is staying home. We're picking up an average of 18 tons of garbage extra a day, along with 3.5 tons extra of recycling. So everyone's staying at home. First couple weeks, there were big piles. Everybody's cleaning out the closets, the attic, the garage. But now, even if you know, anytime you want something to eat, it's to go. So you're bringing something home, you're throwing it away. So that continues. Our highest day so far was just right at 90 tons in one day. So people are staying home, obviously. So we're also, over the past 3 months, we're delivering an average of 33 new homes, delivering cans to an average of 33 new homes. That doesn't count any of the replacements or things that go on with the existing cans. Those are just new residents moving in, and that number is holding steady this month also. So just a little information on how growth is doing through this couple month period that we've had here. We seem to be holding pretty steady so far.
Comments or questions on sanitation highlights, Commissioner Compton?
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding recycling, there was a change in the recycling, obviously, with glass or something. Is that going okay, or are people violating that or following the rules?
So it was really hard to tell because right after we really pushed educational campaign to take glass out, this whole thing changed and our tonnages have been going up. So it's kind of hard to tell. We had 1 month that we picked up, and then we compared it to the next month. We were down a little bit, but then March came and we were back up again. So it's really been hard to track whether or not people are still putting glass in or not.
And I didn't know if the recycling center where you take the recyclables have complained, or have you heard anything that we're doing wrong?
No, we haven't heard anything from them.
I guess it's going well, we hope. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Qualls?
So you've been on the same number of routes for the past several years. Are we to the tipping point, so to speak, where you're going to have to add another route, which has another crew and additional trucks?
We are getting close. We had a new route in our 5-year plan. I think we're 3 years into that, and it was in the 4th or 5th year. So you probably will see something in the next couple of years about adding a new route. You'll probably also see something about a route for brush crews too about the same time, because as we continue to add houses, we continue to get more grass and leaves. And granted, the new subdivisions, there's not a whole lot of limbs in them yet, but like mine was pretty new 17 years ago, but the size of the trees now and the amount of limbs and leaves we get out of my subdivision has really grown. It's quite noticeable.
Any other comments or questions on sanitation?
So then streets, we have a very small increase there, and the big highlights are we're in our 5th year of our first 5-year paving program. This is the 5th year. We're going to be doing a new pavement survey this year that will give us the numbers to create a new 3-year paving list that Mr. Race has asked us to do this every 3 years so that we have fresher numbers and we have a better handle on really where we need to be spending our paving dollars. Because with the list we have this year, I mean, I created it 5 years ago and we're kind of just holding steady with it until we get another survey. So it is kind of old and a little stale, I would say. So if we do it every 3 years, I think we'll get a little better lists. Last year when we went to the UNC benchmarking focus on streets, that was one of the things they did was the asphalt pavement that they do in that survey. Most of the communities at that focus group we're doing every 3 years, so we're gonna try to convert this to every 3 years. So we're also gonna get a purchase of a skidster, which is gonna run a new concrete mixer that we just purchased. This concrete mixer is something that's gonna eventually pay for itself, because right now the concrete companies, if you just get a short load of concrete, 2 to 3 yards, they charge you $150 extra charge for a short load. So if we're going out and doing one handicap ramp, that's about 2 yards of concrete. We spend about $125 in concrete, and they charge us $150 to bring it. So as much as I try to tell that crew, you know, let's get bigger loads, do more things, we continually hit those short load charges. So this will absolutely help us out immensely on saving money on the short load charges. And then we'll be purchasing a backhoe for our asphalt crew that does the road repairs.
Any comments or questions, Commissioner Qualls?
I don't know if this question is more for, probably more for Ryan and Deborah, but I think probably going to that 3-year study is going to be helpful. I'm concerned that over the next couple of years, our power money is probably going to get, it's going to probably shrink, and have to look at whether or not we want to keep up doing about 3 miles or and fund that out of our monies, or what we're going to do to make up that shortfall that will probably come back up.
So that's a great point and question, and it's a conversation that Randy and I have had several times, that the current way that we pay for our paving program is not sustainable the way that we do it now. So if you remember how we started off, we split it between POW and bond funds. We did that for 3 years. The past 2 years, we split it between POW and our general fund. That number continues to eat away at our general fund number. I think it's a point in time that we are going to have to go back and look at some kind of alternate revenue source, because if we do it every 3 years, you're going to consistently see more roads that need to be paved. So we've done good. I mean, we went from, to your point, Commissioner Qualls, from 2.5, 3 miles a year. The last 5 years, we've averaged 6.5, even 7 miles. But as the town continues to grow, that number's never going to shrink. So we need to come up with a revenue source, and we just didn't feel like it was appropriate with the COVID-19 to discuss that. So we figured we would leave it in the general fund 1 more year, but that's definitely a conversation that's going to come back up.
Any other comments or questions, Commissioners? Commissioner Houston?
Great to see that we get these fixed costs. We got a lot of sidewalks now. Everywhere you go, I mean, library, recreation was talking about it last night, trips and falls on Main Street. And being an old neighborhood, a lot of it getting pushed up by those trees. And so it's great to see the guy that out there trying to mix it in a bucket. and saving money too, because if you do bring 3 yards, if you get 20 yards, you got to go to 5 different places. Do they charge you to move it to different places? I'm not sure.
They do also charge us if we move the truck around very much at all. I mean, if it's a couple spots in a neighborhood close together, we can get away with that, but if you want to go from neighborhood to neighborhood, there's also a charge for moving the truck around. And bringing up the tripping hazards that are in the neighborhoods with the trees, a few years back, we did take the trees out of the planting strip to try and reduce that. We have trees in the front yards of houses now. We still require a tree at every house, but it's in their front yard. But we've also started this year renting a grinder from one of the local tool rental places. So we've been doing a lot more grinding of sidewalks so that we can get away with just grinding the sidewalk down to get rid of the tripping hazard rather than replacing it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other comments on the streets?
Okay, so fleet maintenance, we've actually got a little reduction there. That is because we don't have the design money for the phases of the fleet expansion. All 3 phases are complete. I believe there was a time when it was in the budget, then it was taken out of the budget and put into the bonds. So when we're ready to go after some bonds, we do have this all designed and ready to go. I think we were really looking at doing the first 2 phases when that comes around. I guess it'll depend on what the atmosphere is at the time, whether or not we do all 3 phases. And then we're also looking for the replacement of our large tire machine. This is something that does some of the larger fire truck tires and some of the larger tractor tires that our tire guy doesn't mount at his place. He would come to our place and use our machine to mount them because of the way the tires are. We buy most of our tires already on the rims. And this machine, part of it broke last year. It's an old machine. We brought it over from Moore Avenue. We had it there for a few years. The company's no longer in business. You can no longer buy the part of the claw that broke off. So we'll need to replace that.
Comments or questions? Mr. Compton?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Finan, I noticed the Napa contract slightly increased. Is this from the cost of doing business or anything special going on there?
So yeah, the more repairs we do and the more parts we buy from Napa, the more their contract is. So they discount our parts and then they charge us a 10% fee after the discount. So the more parts we buy, that monthly fee is continuing to increase as we put more vehicles in our fleet and we do more repairs and we buy more parts from them.
Okay, thank you. And also, you have 10 full-time employees. Is that adequate? Because it seems like in the past, you've come up needing an extra guy for small engines or for equipment or for something.
So we did add a mechanic a couple years ago. We added a small engine mechanic, I think 2 years ago. We are pretty well off right now. We don't do too bad. The last couple years, we have been doing a quarterly downtime report for each department. So most departments, their downtime is a day or less. I mean, you can't hardly compare that to some of the departments that aren't real high priority. If the street department takes a tandem over there and they have 2 more on the lot, it's gonna sit for a while the fire truck and police cars are getting worked on. So their downtime might be a little bit more, but the priority departments, we've been running right around a day or 2 on their downtime. So I think we've been doing okay.
Thank you, sir. And again, congratulations on your Main Street idea.
Thank you.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up on Commissioner Compton's request about the staffing. If you remember the presentation we made about a year and a half ago, really at this point in time with the facility that we have, we don't have a bay for another mechanic to work, specifically on the heavy side. So once we do go ahead with the fleet expansion, that'll open up 4 additional bays, and then you'll probably see a staffing request at that point in time. So it's a year or 2 away at least.
Okay, and the last one I have is the PAL bill fund. So this again, the highlight is the paving program, which PAL bill funds half the paving program. And this year, a couple of the major roads we're gonna do the other half of Mooresville Plantation Parkway. This will be from Plantation Ridge to Highway 150. The paving contractor is kind of in and out of town right now. They're bouncing around, but the Mooresville Plantation Parkway from Swift Arrow to Plantation Ridge is in this year's contract, and then the second half of it will be in next year's contract. And then another one of the major roads around town is Church Street, so we're gonna be finishing it off. We've done parts of it. We're gonna do McClellan to Moore Avenue next year.
Comments or questions, Commissioner Compton?
Thank you, Mayor.
The last slide is just a map of the paving program.
And, you know, I noticed you did a street survey and you're following that, and I understand what you got scheduled here. But I get a lot of complaints, and I get rattled myself right down South Main Street. from, I guess, the Whataburger down to Wilson Avenue, when you're heading south.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a washboard. So I didn't know where along the schedule, whether it's, not on this schedule, I don't think, but in the time to come, or you're going to have another survey coming up, as you said, so I hope that's identified.
So South Main Street from McClellan, south of town, going down to Huntersville is NCDOT, Highway 115. So that comes north through town to McClellan Avenue. At McClellan Avenue, NC 115 crosses over to Broad Street and continues north. So back in 2005, when we did the downtown streetscape, the only way we could do that was to take those 2 blocks of Main Street from NCDOT. So at that time, they moved NC 115 from Main Street to Broad Street. We took those 2 blocks, and those are the only 2 blocks of Main Street the town owns. Out in front of Town Hall, that's NC 152 that goes out north of town.
So my response to complainers is it's a state project. It will be a state project.
It will be someday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions on that? John, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're right, save the best for last.
Thank you.
So with that, Mayor and Commissioners, that concludes the presentations that we had for public services, and I'm going to hand it back over to Randy to close things out.
Let me recognize Commissioner Qualls.
What we end up with, 3 skits here?
Yep.
I was keeping track of him.
All right, at this time, I guess we'll open it up for any other comments, discussion from the board.
Mr. Dingler? Mr. Compton?
I think some of what was brought up last night was what was on my mind, and I talked to Mr. Heeman earlier in the week about that, and a couple of commissioners.
Mr. West?
Just, like I said, thank you for putting this all together. I think it's very good. I like it what score we are in terms of our services, what's more important. And at the end of the day, our services, police, fire, roads, utilities, sanitation, water. And so I think we've kept that focus and what we want to do for this year's budget. Thank you.
Mr. Qualls?
Yeah, this is, sympathize with Deborah and the entire team. They're trying to just guess what's going to be the impact of our sales tax and our property tax to try to come up with a budget and applaud. What do you come up with? Obviously, our number one question is going to be why are we not lowering taxes with the sale of Continuum? Right now, not knowing if we're going to have 50% of our sales tax or 10%, or we're going to have 90%, or what that is going to be. I think it's tough to be able to do that. I'm hopeful that next year, as things balance out a little bit, we can address the property tax amount and have some relief, perhaps. I know there were a lot of positions that were asked for, and trying to be very, very methodical and fill those positions with a limited amount. I do hope that we'll keep our focus on succession planning in each department. We have several that, we've had transitions of leadership there, and now ready to fill that second seat and stay focused on that. That's been a long-standing goal of this board, is to make sure that we are not going to be here all the time. The staff has got to be stable and making sure that there is that next person when somebody retires or wins the lottery or whatever their plans are. And moving forward in ways that we can be more efficient. More efficient means better technology, more efficient applications. It's been probably interesting to see as folks have not been able to come into town hall how much that behavior will change when town hall opens up again. You know, maybe we thought we needed 3 or 4 people, or however many people we have in the, taking utility payments. So we might not need that many people to do that, so that person could be repurposed to do something else. So I'll be excited to hear from staff as we start to progress into the next chapter, what efficiencies we're going to be able to gain that we learned through this COVID-19. So thank you again for a great job putting things together and making it, and just a great deal of unknown. So I appreciate it.
Commissioner Whittington?
I would just like to say thanks to Deborah, thanks to Randy, and thanks to your staff, who did a wonderful job. I wasn't sure I was going to get through reading all this, but I thought, well, if they can present it, I can read it. So it took me several days, but great job.
Commissioner Houston?
My mic's not working.
Yes, I think everything.
I'm just gonna say, thank you to all the staff for all of it. And I think the big positive I get out of this is that when the directors and the staff came forward, they made a decision to take things out that they didn't really need. And that's a plus for me, I think a lot. That means a lot to me, that they see the necessity of what more we need, and they don't mind giving a little bit more to help to make things easier. So that really means a lot to me and the staff and board that we have. And I just hope that the board can figure out some way that we can award these people for the things that they've done. I know we pay them, but that's paying. But I think that we need to really show them what we appreciate and how they try to come forward and make it really easy for the citizens of the board. I think it's just outstanding to see that. And also the board here working there for us looking in the future too, to have money reserved to do some of these projects that's going forward, even through this crisis. Yeah, we got a crisis ahead, but right now, pretty grounded right now. I think we'll pull out of this, and I think our staff reacted the way they do, not pulling it out, and say, do a little extra mile, and less, that really means a lot to me. And I just want to say thank you to the staff.
Well, thank you, Commissioners, for those comments. I echo and share your same appreciation and gratitude, and commend the staff and Mr. Heeman and the assistant town managers and all who pulled this together. Mr. Heeman, what can the Commissioners expect moving forward after tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to point out, because of the timing associated with electronic meetings, I will be needing to present this Monday to you in my manager's briefing so that we can meet the deadlines in order to that have changed due to electronic meetings. So I just want to point that out. It's necessary to meet those requirements. So that's the next step. This is a working document, obviously, until it is adopted. So questions, comments, suggestions are still obviously out there. It is your budget, and changes can still be made in the document. So we would be happy to continue to converse on this as we go along. But I want to thank especially Deborah and Deanna, who is behind the curtain here today. There was a lot of work, and I want to reiterate what Commissioner Houston said. There were a lot of people, there was a lot of teamwork that went into this. And when you have folks that do come forward and say, hey, your department needs that more than mine, that's the kind of teamwork that we want to continue to promote. And it's the kind of teamwork that gets us where we want to be at the end of the day. And staff has done a great job, so hats off to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heeman. If there's not any other comments or questions, we'll go ahead and end this budget workshop, and thank you all very much.